Oh, g'day, mate. 40 here. I mean, do you guys know about all the natural cures that they're hiding from you? That the elites are hiding from you? I mean, do you guys even realize the power of potentiated bee pollen? And do you know why? You know, our elites, our legislators, they're hiding from us these amazing cures. Right? Cures for cancer, man. It's in apricot seeds and stuff. And cures for COVID, right? Why are our elites hiding all these magical, mysterious cures from us? And I'll give you one answer, bro. They're hiding these cures from us so that they can enslave us, and so they can hold us down, and so that they can keep us from all the health benefits that they get to experience. All right, so they know how powerful these natural cures are. Bro, do you even know about the free money that they're hiding from you? All this free money is out there. It's just sloshing around. And the elites, bro, they're just hiding it from you. Right? So I'm not going to argue that elites are always right. But if you have, on the one hand, someone with no education and no apparent expertise in a topic, and they're going up against elite consensus, then from where I stand, the onus is on the non-elite person who's trying to knock down the elite consensus. I mean, that's just what I see. I don't think that the FDA is hiding all these miraculous cures from us. Now, I'm not saying that there are problems with the FDA, but I just don't believe that they're hiding all these, amazing cures from us. And the guy who wrote the book, Kevin Trudeau, he wrote The Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About. And he also wrote the follow-up, The Free Money They Don't Want You to Know About. Well,
Walk your way out of this one. That's what a federal judge in Chicago told the silver-tongued former infomercial king Kevin Trudeau today before ordering him off to jail. It's not Trudeau's first time behind bars, but this ruling follows a long game of cat and mouse between him and the U.S. government. After determining he misled customers, the courts had ordered him to pay back $37 million in restitution. But Trudeau claims he doesn't have any assets and cannot pay. So last month, a federal judge appointed a receiver to investigate his spending. And when he used an Australian bank account to pay for, basic human needs like cigars, liquor, and $180 haircuts, the judge wanted answers. As did my Nightline co-anchor Bill Weir when he found Trudeau living large in Switzerland a few months ago for our series Nightline on the Lookout.
I want you to welcome the person that's responsible for bringing us all together.
6 months ago, we went on the lookout for an ex-con who sells hope.
Kevin Trudeau.
And the people who love him.
Wasn't that fantastic? Are you excited? Say yes! Yes!
Get on the phone and call and get Mega Memory.
They believe in him, despite decades of incredible claims.
It's virtually a facelift in a bottle.
And government warnings that he cannot be trusted.
You can lose all the weight you want effortlessly.
They trust him.
Come on, guys, you can lose all the weight you want effortlessly. It's a facelift in a bottle, guys. Come on. So about 18 years ago, I was dating and she told me about this natural healer in the San Fernando Valley. He would use magnets, right? So I went to see him about half a dozen, maybe a dozen times, thought it might help with my chronic fatigue syndrome. And he was a big believer in this Kevin Trudeau book, The Natural Cures That They Don't Want You to Know About. Now, at the same time, if you've watched any of my shows from earlier this week, I'm pretty clear that the evidence for antidepressant medication is only modestly above that of the evidence for a placebo effect. So there's just as much evidence for SSRIs, antidepressant medication, helping with depression, as there is for exercise and psychotherapy. But there's not a big psychotherapy lobby, and there's not a big exercise lobby that compares with the pharmaceutical lobby. So when drugs get approved by the FDA, they only have to show 2 test results that reveal better than placebo results. Now, they might have 4 test results that show average or worse than placebo results, but they don't have to make those public. So whether it's, Effexor or those famous listening to Prozac, all these famous SSRIs, the scientific empirical evidence for them is quite modest, quite slim, and no larger than the evidence for exercise. So I'm not someone who's automatically pro or against big pharma. So that's where I'm coming from. Absolutely, I'm sure that there are natural cures and natural substances that work better than medicine and big pharma. My father would often tell me most diseases either cure themselves or they can't be cured. And I think it's fairly obvious as well that our growing lifespan in the West is not primarily being driven by these amazing breakthroughs in medicine. It's rather being driven by amazing breakthroughs in sanitation. So we owe long life much more to the garbage men than we do to medical doctors. At the same time, I had my life changed profoundly for the best by a medical doctor, a psychiatrist who gave me a pharmacological medication, Nardil, in 1993 that brought me out of 6 years of basic bedridden status. Now, I'm not saying that my anecdote is proof or evidence. I'm just sharing with you my personal experience. My life was transformed for the good by a wonderful Orlando psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Goldwyn. Also, another psychiatrist about 8 years ago gave me a prescription to modafinil. And modafinil, I think, has just considerably transformed my life for the good. I say I'm 20% happier on modafinil. I say I'm probably 25% more productive. And to me, it's a massive force multiplier. Now, modafinil is not a treatment used for depression, but when people start falling into pharmaceuticals to treat depression, they usually have side effects. And then to deal with some of the side effects, such as brain fog, then often Provigil, aka modafinil, is thrown into the mix.
Even though a federal judge decided he bamboozled so many people into buying his weight loss book, he should pay back $37 million. And when he says he holds secrets for wealth and happiness long guarded by the world's elite 1%, they give their hearts and minds and hard-earned dollars.
How much have you spent?
Maybe $10,000, maybe $20,000, a lot.
But here is the interesting part. While teaching people how to get rich, Kevin Trudeau says he is broke.
I gave away everything I own.
But the authorities say that is a charade. And earlier this summer, the hammer came down on this self-help empire. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we get to the latest developments, let's start at the beginning of our search for man and money. The wintry day.
So I got my second jab, my second shot of Pfizer. I did a little research. So apparently with the first shot, the Pfizer vaccine is about 75-80% effective. So the United Kingdom has placed much more emphasis on getting everybody their first shot. The United States has placed more emphasis on getting everybody their second shot. So if you get the second shot, supposedly it lasts longer. So I got my second shot yesterday. A little tired, a little bit of a sore left arm. No major ill effects. Wasn't feeling particularly sprightly this morning. But bro, I had to fight my way out of South Central to get back to Beverly Hills. I mean, these are not the soft, delicate hands of a writer or a blogger or a vlogger. Okay, these are fists. Okay, all these calluses and scrapes and blood and pus. I mean, I'm not just a pretty face, bro. I had to fight my way out of South Central, just like falling down. Except I didn't commit any crimes. It was all self-defense. So that could take a toll on a 54-year-old bloke. But I'm still standing, better than I ever did, feeling like a true survivor, acting like a little kid. I'm still standing after all this time. And you know what got me through from South Central to Beverly Hills again, safe and in one piece? It was knowing that with this community that we've built here, none of us need to ever walk alone. Right? This show is not primarily about information. It's not primarily about entertainment. This is a relationship, guys. So maybe we should talk more about the quality of our relationship. How's our communication these days? Are you feeling safe? Have we created a vessel? I want to create a vessel for you to come down from your hyper-aroused state and to just drop down and land in this really safe vessel here where we can feel free and safe to share whatever's on our mind. Because once you're part of the leucosphere, bro, you'll never walk alone. I mean, we're a community, bro.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown.
I really like this soprano, Laura Wright. I mean, walk on, guys. Walk on. Walk on with hope in your heart. Walk on. You'll never, ever, ever, ever walk alone. So there's this surgeon, David Gorski, and he says one of the biggest medical conspiracy theories for a long time it's been out there is that there are all these fantastic cures for cancer and other deadly diseases, but you can't have them. You can't have them because the FDA just does not want you to have all these like fantastic cures for diseases. They're out there, but they don't want you to have them. This is the Kevin Trudeau approach, or the evil jackbooted thugs of the FDA. They're just so close-minded. They're just so blinded by science, bro, that they will crush any attempt to market such drugs. And under the most charitable assessment, the FDA is just dramatically slowing down the approval of these, all natural cures. So Kevin Trudeau will tell us there are all these natural cures, all this alternative medicine cures that are being suppressed by the FDA, the AMA, the American Medical Association, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, state medical boards, all these other entities. And why are they doing it, bro? At the behest of their big pharma overlords, right? So again, my attitude is there's like no industry that's just inherently evil. All right. So nobody likes to think about the harm of what they're doing. So thousands of people work for soda pop companies. All right. So fully caffeinated, filled with sugar soda is just horrible for you. And porn stars don't think about the consequences of what they do. People who market credit cards don't think about the negative consequences of what they do. People who make money from casinos don't think about the massive negative consequences for gambling addicts. So almost nobody likes to think about the negative consequences of what they do. But there's no miraculous solution out there that is going to significantly improve the quality of our lives. It's not like, if the FDA was only, less regulated or more efficient or more effective, that suddenly our lives would be just transformed by all these natural cures with the New Zealand potentiated bee pollen, right? You just take that New Zealand potentiated bee pollen and that, pow! You feel the power. Feel the power.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark.
All together, walk on.
Through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never,
I got a lot of her songs. They just like fire me up when it's like showtime. Like, how do you think I prepare? It's not just prayer. It's not just meditation. It's not just intensive study. It's not just checking in with my sources of information. No, some Laura, lovely lady. What's your name? Laura Wright. My English rose, my English soprano. So there are all these natural cures out there that are being suppressed. All right, so there are a bunch of libertarians like Nick Gillespie who think, oh, if we just call off the dogs at the FDA, we'll just unleash, the health freedom movement. You a paid up member, a card carrying member of the health freedom movement, bro? You out there pushing for freedom to try, right to try legislation that's been going all around the United States over the past 15 years. So a lot of libertarians and small government fantasists, believe that there's we need freedom. If only we got the heavy hand of government removed and those jackbooted thugs of the FDA called off, then the free market innovation would just flourish, bro. And all these natural cures so long suppressed by an overweening regulatory apparatus, the floodgates would just open, and these cures long held back by the dam of the FDA would flow to the people. Now, didn't exactly work that way before the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. So the idea that the FDA is keeping cures from desperate terminally ill people, either intentionally or unintentionally, through its insistence on a rigorous science-based approval process in which drugs are taken through preclinical work, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 testing before approval, is one of the major driving beliefs commonly used to justify so-called right-to-try laws. So if you've been paying any attention to my show over the past year, I am about the least outraged vlogger with regard to various government attempts to deal with COVID-19. So the one thing that did trigger me was that we had the vaccine back January 13th of 2020. We had the formula for the vaccine, and we had every indication that it would not be dangerous, but we still had to wait almost a year before the vaccine would get approved and sent out because it had to go through a regulatory process. And that struck me as outrageous. Like, why could not thousands of people who wanted to volunteer to test the vaccine, why should they not be allowed to? And so that comes down to a deep philosophical issue. How much should the government and medicine and government bureaucracy, how much should these agencies protect people from hurting themselves? So you hear a lot of feminists making the case for abortion, saying, oh, a woman should be able to do what she wants with her own body. But in virtually no civilized country of which I'm aware, do you have the right to do whatever you want with your own body? You can't commit suicide, for example. It's against the law to try to commit suicide. So almost all industrialized nations have seatbelt laws. So occasionally not wearing a seatbelt will save a life, but far more often wearing a seatbelt will save a life. If Princess Diana had been wearing a seatbelt, she would have survived her accident. If Bob Simon, the 60 Minutes CBS News veteran, had been wearing a seatbelt during his car accident a few years ago, he would have survived. So government imposes all sorts of laws to restrict exactly what people can do with their own body. Now, I thought, challenge trials. What the heck could be the problem with challenge trials? And then I stumbled upon a dialogue in the New York Review of Books, where Marcia Angell, for 10 years, she was the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. And here's the problem with challenge trials. So she says there are two specific problems with even the most carefully done challenge studies of a COVID-19 vaccine. First, she wrote this in August of 2020. First, we know very little about this novel virus, including what are the hidden or long-term effects it might have on even young, healthy volunteers. And second, will a vaccine be equally effective in the elderly and the chronically ill, those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19? So more generally, she says, I worry about the erosion of our hard-won ethical consensus, starting with the Nuremberg Code. Did you guys know about the Nuremberg Code? I assume that started after World War II. That people should not be used as means to an end if they might be harmed. So there's also a risk of bribery or coercion in enrolling volunteers, even if they are officially unpaid. So I have a friend, Yoshi. He makes most of his income from being a guinea pig for drug trials. So Marcia Engel says this erosion of our ethical standards, even for a good cause, would be an unfortunate precedent. We would be on the proverbial slippery slope downhill. So if research subjects in the United States are sickened or injured in a vaccine trial or drug trial, they can face financial ruin on top of their illness. So most sponsoring agencies for medical trials require subjects to pay for their own medical care, and virtually none of them guarantee compensation for pain, suffering, or the inability to work. Second, many of the current industry sponsors of vaccine trials have a record of buying, spinning, and rigging their research. So I'm not shocked that there are members of Big Pharma who've engaged in deceit. I mean, think about the tens of thousands of Americans who've died early, died at a ridiculously young age because Purdue Pharma has been so successful marketing opioids. And even if a trial leads to a vaccine, we've been given no guarantees that it will be made available to those who can't afford it, raising the possibility that the sacrifices made in vaccine trials will yield benefits primarily to the rich and the well-insured. Now, we have an extraordinary number of people willing to volunteer without being told about the fine print. And this is a recipe for exploitation. So these various medical ethicists are disturbed by the use of subjects as a means to an end, especially when the risks are unknown, because if you want to find out if the COVID vaccine works, you have to infect people or give them the possibility of being infected with COVID. And so what are the long-term ramifications, even if you're young and healthy, of being infected with COVID? So these doctors say we need to close a lot more doors. In phase 1 trials, researchers routinely use subjects as a means to an end, even when the risks are significant and the subjects are vulnerable. That slope was slippery, and we have reached the bottom. We need to find a way back up. Now, on the other hand, by not allowing challenge trials, about 3 million people have died. Like, if we'd allowed challenge trials, we could have rolled out the vaccine a year ago. So I now better understand the case against challenge trials.
Chicago, a place called Gold Coast Bentley. While claiming to be on the brink of bankruptcy, Mr. Trudeau drove this very car last year. Ooh. A $230,000 Continental Flying Spur. We rented this rolling hunk of luxury as a little surprise for the mystery guest we're about to pick up at O'Hare Airport.
Hey, Abe. Hey, how we doing? What's up, man? Bill Weir.
Bill, nice to meet you. I'm Abe.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
This is Abe Hussein, smitten with a Trudeau sales pitch. He says he spent thousands, but then he says he stopped believing in Kevin Trudeau. Abe was working at a restaurant in Kansas City when he bought a set of Trudeau's self-help CDs, which came with an enticing offer to join something called the Global Information Network, or GIN.
They said that 30 billionaires in royalty from across the world formed GIN.
Yes, you heard right. Trudeau says his club was formed by a secret council of 30 billionaires, royals, and world leaders, a mysterious cabal willing to sell their secrets of success to whoever will pay $1,000 down and $150 a month.
This group of people includes several members of major royal families, Skull and Bones, Trilateral
Whoa.
Commission.
But of these
Whoa, natural cures that they don't want you to know about, and free money that they don't want you to know about. So Jack Murphy, Michael Anton, and Curtis Yarvin.
Variety of which I have some.
Having
I have friends and I have enemies.
On...
My enemies see me as, a dangerous enabler of Trump. And I've noticed, I'm writing about this
Michael
now, I
Anton.
haven't finished. Like, a lot of people have been trying to pin on me January 6th. The Flight 93 riot is a phrase that we're trying to introduce into currency, starting with Rich Lowry, a former friend who's become an enemy. And lots of others, but I saw it's just something the other day on Law and Liberty trying to use this. They're trying to spread it around. Then again, I've got some other people who like what I say, like what I write, who see me, I think, as somebody who saw certain things coming and got it right and tried to rally public opinion or portions of public opinion, conservative opinion, around what I thought was the only real viable alternative in 2016 and in 2020. Obviously, it didn't work out. We lost. I put lost in quotes because I remain unconvinced that I know exactly what happened in the 2020 election. I'm not convinced it was stolen, but I'm not convinced it was fair either. And the one thing I'm convinced of is we're just never going to know. So I leave it to others, I guess, to say that. I do.
Okay, so he's saying incredibly inflammatory things, because once you posit simply the possibility that the election was stolen, you are releasing any moral obligations from people who side with you. So you'd think that he would have at least done some research. And so I've read his essays trying to make the case that voter fraud may have determined the 2020 election. It's so bad. his work is absolutely pathetic. It's so bad, it verges on, I think it verges on sociopathic. Like, you'd think, given his platform and all the shows that he goes on and all the forums that he has to share his ideas, that he would feel some sort of obligation to do a little bit of research. But I've read his pieces contesting the 2020 election results, or raising questions about the 2020 election results, and it's pathetic. Come on, man. Look, if you're in the position of a Michael Anton, then you know a lot of people. Why would you not bounce your ideas off people with expertise, say, in voter fraud? If I was going to come on here and say, hey, guys, there's this all-natural cure for lung cancer, I know enough doctors, or I know people who know doctors, that I'd bounce it off them before I came on here and insinuated that the FDA is trying to prevent us from cures for lung cancer.
I do know that, as I said, I've got a lot of friends, I've got a lot of enemies, and most of my enemies are thankfully people I don't personally know. A handful of them are people I used to know.
A lot of friends and a lot of enemies. Well, what you had some far more than friends or enemies. You have people who at one time found you interesting, and people who disagreed with you but appreciated the intellectual challenge. And now you've got a whole bunch of people who regard the way you conduct your public self as essentially sociopathic. So that's me. So in 2016 up through to 2020, I really enjoyed Michael Anton. And now I'm thinking, what a fool I was. This guy is completely irresponsible.
Who have decided to become enemies. And at that point, what are you going to do? Move on? I'd like to think that for every...
It's not a matter of like becoming enemies. It's just that if you're out there on the streets, egging people on to engage in insurrection, and that's essentially what he's doing. He's not on the streets. He's just doing it online. Then there's going to be blowback. There are consequences for the things that we say and do publicly. So it's not personal. I have nothing personal against Michael Anton. Most of the people who are his fiercest critics in 2021, it's not any personal problem they have with the guy. It's just that we recognize that he's demonstrated absolutely no interest in the things that he's talking about, finding out substantiation or lack of substantiation for things that he's talking about. He's saying inflammatory things without investigating how much evidence there is for them.
Old friend who becomes a new enemy. I pick up a net, at least 1.1 new friends, and usually
most of the world. Look, this is so egotistical. Like, if you hate me or you love me, unless we have like a personal relationship, you're not my friend or my enemy. All right, you're just someone who objects to my public words and behavior, or someone who enjoys or likes my public words or behavior. It's not really personal. Nothing's personal, right? We come with certain emotional predispositions. We come with certain intellectual predispositions. We come with certain mood predispositions. And then what does our conscious mind do? Is our conscious mind primarily like weighing evidence and making rational decisions? No. The primary thing that our conscious mind does is develop narratives justifying the decisions that we've already decided we want to take, right? We're not governed by the prefrontal cortex, except to the degree that we come up with narratives that justify all the things that we want to say and do. That's the primary purpose for our conscious thinking. So there's a great course on this, Effective Communication Skills. You can get it on Audible, 11 lectures by Professor Dalton Kehoe.
Not make us look so good. We think, well, we'll tell them later when they know us better, ignoring the basic contradiction in there that how will they know us better if we're already revising us now? Courtship is just a very clear example of the alterations to our sense of self that occur as we play multiple roles in our lives. As child, teenage peer, college student, young lover, parent, employee, manager, in-law, we adapt to fit each of these roles, and the feedback we get from others as we do this subtly shifts our sense of self, who we are, over time. We need to think of ourselves as a diamond. We're always polishing it, and sometimes we actually cut new facets. We glow in different ways. We naturally alter the outside edges of ourselves as we learn new things and try new things, but this is mostly done automatically, unthinkingly. A good deal of our learning about ourselves comes from watching ourselves perform things that we are called upon in life to do. And as we are trying to manage our presentation of self, we give ourselves feedback just as others do. Our self or self-concept is the narrative that holds our lives together. Some argue that this is the primary role of the conscious mind in human life, the construction of and the carefully managed maintenance of this story of the self. Finally, our self-concept anchors our attitudes and our judgments. We never approach situations neutrally. Our self is the position from which we look out at the world and see it the way we are, not the way it is. In fact, major contemplative religions argue that this construction, this ego, is the very thing we have to get out of the way if we're ever going to see the world the way it really is and be one with it. Well, they may be right, but for us at this moment, the self is here. It's real, and we need to notice its development and operations.
Okay, let's get a little bit more here from Michael Anton.
Usually it's more than that.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that. Curvis, what do you think? What does the world think of you? How does that jive with what you think you're doing?
Well, you know, the problem I have is I'm one of these kinds of writers who actually,
So Curtis Yarvin, I just think he's massively overrated. I just don't get much value from his speaking or his writing. Again, completely irresponsible. He weighs in on all sorts of topics that he hasn't done much research on, and he doesn't then make that clear. He weighs in like he knows all this stuff about World War II, for example, and he just doesn't know very much. So I'm sure he's had some great insights in the past, but it's apparently gone to his head. And so now he apparently feels that, you know, anything that comes into his mind, well, that's just going to be gold, like perhaps some insights that he came up with 10 years ago.
An old thing that someone once said where they're like, I don't like to read my reviews because either there'll be good reviews or there'll be bad reviews. And neither of those things is helpful. So in a way, I think having as little knowledge or as little opinion.
What you should be looking for with reviews is, are they accurate or are they inaccurate? Are they fair? Are they important? Like, I have massive blind spots. You have massive blind spots. I remember I was driving along early one Sunday morning with my girlfriend. We were taking a day trip to Monterey. And I was driving north up the Pacific Coast Highway, and it was about 6 a.m., and I pulled out to overtake a car, and then I kept driving in the oncoming lane. Like, this was just a massive blind spot. And so my girlfriend starts tapping on the front of the inside of the car to indicate I should move over. I'd completely forgotten that I was driving in the oncoming lane. So yeah, massive blind spots. I remember I came back from Australia and a family member was driving us along and I was the passenger and I didn't feel safe. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my hand on what was wrong. And so this family member was driving along in the oncoming traffic. All right. She was driving on the left-hand side of the road because that's what you do in Australia. So when we get feedback, all right, it can reveal to us our blind spots and factual information and new perspectives. It's not about whether they like us or not.
Opinion is possible of what the world thinks of you is kind of the proper state for a writer, and it's certainly it's a kind of marketing. It lends itself to very, very bad and ineffective marketing. But I think that kind of marketing is sort of more effective over the long term because you're so focused. So many writers, I mean, for obvious reasons, are focused on what is, you know, the world's opinion of me. If there is, as Michael said, a world, I'm like, first of all, I don't think there's a world. There's no world. There's lots of different worlds. Secondly, mainly my goal as a writer is to be able to survive and write. And so when you're trying to survive and write, actually the only people you care about, especially once you're in the business of writing, because I should pimp my Substack. I write graymirror.substack.com, which is actually, as Michael was telling me, I avoid looking at this. I'm still number 18 on the Substack.
So a lot of people I know, like Curtis Yarvin, aka Mencius Moldbug, respect him, have struggled through his work. I've just never found a reward from putting effort into his work, and particularly the things that he just says off the top of his head on live streams, I've not found impressive.
Political dashboard. So there's something. I mean, on the other hand, I've been doing this for 10 years, right? Not 10 years, really 14 years. So with a little break in between to run a company. So that's a very different kind of marketing and thinking about marketing. And so you don't really count like who are my friends, who are my enemies. Like Michael, I try not to have enemies. I think of the people on the other side very much less as enemies than as predators. I have, you know, occasional, like Michael, I have occasional like personal enemies, people who've just sort of gone weird, but that's really, really rare. And, you know, when you're dealing with first, when you're dealing with predators rather than enemies, there's a totally different set of tactics that come into play, because you're actually, it's like the lion versus the buffalo. It's completely asymmetric. You have no intention of.
Okay, so there's some benefit in thinking of, oh, there are these predators out there. There are some people who you could call predators, but more often, all of us contain predatory instincts. So the type of people that you attract to yourself, whether they're praising you or attacking you, they're largely a reflection of you. We have a great deal to say about how other people react to us. And if we take a little bit more time with what we say, we can often reduce the intensity of the hatred or the opposition against us. So most of the time, the people we want to call predators are not predators as a ongoing condition. They're predators in certain states. When you fire them up, all right, all of us become predators with sufficient stimuli.
Of hurting the lion, you have complete respect for the lion. If the lion eats someone else in a Machiavellian sense, okay, well, he didn't eat you, right? And so that's a way of thinking about security that's totally different. And so, to the extent that, do I have friends? Well, I'm sort of in a position where I don't really need friends because I'm marketing very directly through my Substack, which is very high quality and available at graymirror.substack.com. And then do I need to not have enemies? Well, I need to not have anyone who can kind of try to personally destroy me. That's actually relatively rare.
We all need friends. This is a delusion that he does not need friends.
I think that to the extent that I'm cognizant of my sort of picture in the mainstream world, I think people have gotten very, very good at ignoring me. And that's something that as a prey species, I really, really welcome. I don't want to bother.
So why have people become so good at ignoring you? Because for many years, I can't recall the last time that Curtis Yarvin had an important thought. When did he last say something that was important? When was he last worth paying attention to?
Of them, they don't find me easy to chew on. That's a great relationship, And
he's easy to chew on. Like, he's so reckless. He makes so many comments without any regard to facts or scholarship. He's very, very easy to chew on. It's just, what's the point, right? He hasn't produced anything important in many years, of which I'm aware.
In a Machiavellian sense, of course. And so that's that's maybe a little more complicated answer than Michael. I think Michael has some of the same things going on as well, because the fact is he's just too good. And one of the things they love to do is promote the second-rate people.
Well, I will.
Michael's not too good. He doesn't do the amount of homework for many of the things that he talks about that a normal, responsible 8th grader would do. But he wants to think rather that the opposition to him, it's all personal by predators.
We'll say I do have it coming to a degree, because I do take these people on in a way that I would say, I don't know, Curtis, correct me if I'm wrong, but you tend not to, at least to the degree and with the frequency that I do. I'll just.
That is true. Anton does throw himself into the fray. So to that extent, I have to recognize his bravery. At the same time, I recognize his sociopathy in his complete disregard for knowing the facts about many of the things he talks about. So many sociopaths are brave, and many brave people are sociopathic.
Go right after the conservative intellectuals on point A, point B, point C. For instance, I took off after Jay Nordlinger. Now, granted, I was asked to do that. I was hired. The Law and Liberty came and said, we're doing a symposium on the weather underground. We would like you to be one of the guys who writes a response. Okay, sure. It wasn't like I just read the piece and said, I'm going to go attack this guy. They asked me to do it. I read his piece. I thought, this is awful. And I wrote a fairly scathing response to it. And, it brings out people who get mad at me for having done that. So I don't so much complain about that. If I take the first whack, people, I should get hit back. It's the way these kinds of things go. And I've taken a lot of first whacks at people if I think that they're wrong, if I think that they're saying something that's unhelpful or, bad.
So I think Michael Anton has a very impressive body of work from the past, but now I'm reassessing him given how reckless he's been since the election.
I'm groping for the right word, something that helps make things worse. I will attack, and then I expect to be attacked back. I got an email from someone I never really knew, roughly a year ago, saying, a somewhat prominent person saying, I've heard through the grapevine that you consider me an enemy, and I hope that's not true. And I had never thought about this person. I barely knew who he was. I don't know where he got that idea. And all I said back was, look, to write is to be criticized. So I don't even know or necessarily care what you think of me. But he really hated something that I had written, my review of, when did this come out? I don't even remember anymore. It was so long ago. Anyway, I reviewed a book called Bronze Age Mindset. I think it's coming on 2 years ago, which Curtis gave me, by the way. That's how I got that book. I think it was August of 19.
I knew I was
And I think I might need to give some credit here to Curtis and Michael in that they put much more effort into that book. I just found it so distasteful, the pushing of it was just so drenched in promoting homosexuality that I was repelled. Not to mention the writing style. I've never found any benefit from listening to Bronze Age Pervert.
Giving you a poison pill there.
And I knew, so somebody
but-
saw it and guy got really mad and he trashed it. I didn't even see that he trashed me for having written the review. Like the book is terrible.
Oh,
but you're a terrible.
that guy. Yeah. Let's not say his name. That guy. Right.
Your book is terrible and you're a terrible person for having written this.
So The Stakes was a book that Michael Anton published in 2020, making the case for re-electing Donald Trump.
Review, and then he writes to me out of the blue
Wow.
saying, I've heard that you think that we're enemies and I hope that's not true. And I'm like, I've actually never thought about you at all. But look, I wrote this piece knowing that I'd get criticized and fine, I got criticized. Okay, no problem.
Curtis,
I give you credit for that Mad Men line. Sorry.
you and I met a few years ago in Washington, D.C., and in fact, you shared with me that very same story of the lion and the buffalo. And I got to tell you that actually had a really big influence on me. I took that story. I took that story to heart because I had been spending a lot of time online jousting and writing direct response to other people on the other side and attacking things. And you know what, man? Like I encountered other prey animals and I got wounded. Like I got doxxed, I got fired, I got shamed, swatted, the whole thing. They came after my kids, all of it. And that conversation you had with me inspired me to actually really create a private, robust community, a network of people where instead of seeking out these, attack situations on the plains, we kind of just go our own way for a little bit, stay healthy, get strong, and grow. And that's what we've been doing with the Limb Order.
And they ignore you, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's a good way to go. I don't spend very much time arguing with people. I've got a certain close number of friends who I bounce ideas off, and I guess we argue, but it is at a low temperature. So yeah, having friends, having friendly relationships with people you can bounce ideas off, and even argue, but at a low temperature. People who are not frantic and vitriolic. Much better use of one's time.
It's important to never. Like, it's just the mindset of the prey species is so different from the mindset of I'm a fellow lion, sort of hear me roar. It's a completely different, and it's like, it's so, the thing is that you can't understate.
Look, prey species depends upon circumstance. You change the circumstance and the prey species changes, all right? You can't, I assume, plant eucalyptus trees on the North Pole. Right, so eucalyptus trees are an invasive species. When they move in, they emit compounds that prevent other plants and trees from growing around them or beside them. So you change the environment, though. When eucalyptus trees can't grow, then they're not predatory. And same with people. Right, I'm much more of a structuralist than these people. I believe that structures are the primary influences on how the world works. It's not primarily individuals. So whether Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump is president of the United States, it's not that important. It's got moderate importance. But I don't look at individuals so much as structures. We've got structures in society right now that incentivize people to behave like predators, to engage in cancel culture. That's a rational response to the incentives that are embedded in our current structure.
Like, especially when you sort of encountered, especially personally, the evil that these kinds of people can do, you basically can't.
So I'm fine with descriptions of evil, but all evil is subjective taste, right? It's no more objectively true than saying that strawberry ice cream is superior to chocolate ice cream, unless you can ascribe the evil to a transcendent source of morality. So if you have a religious basis saying, oh, God said this and God said don't do that, then you can claim objective morality based upon a subjective leap of faith to that transcendent source. But otherwise, talking about evil, it's just a subjective taste, just like some people prefer strawberry ice cream to chocolate ice cream.
It's very difficult to come to grasps with their sincerity. And yet, in general,
it's not that difficult to come to grasp with people's sincerity. It just takes a little bit of effort to put yourself in the shoes of other people, right? Different peoples have different morals. They have different ways of viewing the world. They have different things that they weigh up as most important. Jonathan Haidt is the master of the work on moral foundations. But people don't want to do that little bit of effort to understand where other people are coming from. But if you put in modest amount of effort, you can understand where pretty much anyone is coming from. And it's not just because they're evil. You can understand where Hitler was coming from. You can understand where Stalin was coming from. You can understand where Robert was coming from, or Hillary Clinton.
In general, their sincerity is complete, which makes them such effective presidents.
There's no way of assessing people's sincerity. This is just a complete loser direction of a conversation, right? You can't really get your hands on whether people are sincere or not. And even if they are sincere, 75% sincere in this situation, not sincere, it doesn't really matter, right? There's no link between sincerity and goodness, decency, truth. Sincerity has no meaning, just like trying to figure out and dismiss other people's motives. We usually can't even understand our own motives, let alone accurately assess other people's motives.
Predators. I was just reading this discourse between two journalists. I think it was Liz Lenz and the great Talia Lavin. Talia Levin, someone whose name ends with the same three letters as mine, right? And they're talking about being harassed, and these are people whose basically profession is that of a kind of soft Stasi going around and writing exposés that really destroy people's lives, and they're
okay. So I would assume that Talia Lavin has received hundreds of death threats. Right? It's not inconceivable to me how people like Talia and people like her understand that as harassment. Now, that doesn't mean that she's a pure, pristine rose that needs to be protected from all criticism. But this is like a prime example. It doesn't take that much empathy to understand where someone else is coming from and why they regard highly detailed, graphic death threats as harassment.
Like, well, I got a nasty email. I was so upset I cried in the shower all morning. And
Talia Lavin, this is a great example. She doesn't even block me. I have made so many critical tweets and comments about Talia Lavin. She doesn't block me. I don't think in general she blocks her critics. I mean, that's not some namby-pamby, can't take criticism type of girl. She doesn't, generally speaking, block people.
And those things to those people appear as they do not appear the way they appear to us. When these people use their power, they're basically...
Okay, again, it's not the way that things appear to them or appear to us. It's much deeper than that. Come on, guys. We need to have an embodied conversation. We need to come down from this hyper state of arousal where we're fighting and let's land, let's calm down, then understand that it's not so much that you and I may see the world differently. What's far more important to understand is that you and I experience the world differently. It's not that we're seeing the world differently, it's that we're experiencing, feeling the world differently. That's what's going on.
They're doing good in the world. They're superheroes. They're fending off evil. And then, when these superheroes are basically assaulted in typically these crude, vile ways. By the way, I developed this prey analogy a while ago, but I can never get nasty emails. If I get a nasty email, it's always from some little bitchy thing from some 17-year-old right winger. But I feel like one of those fish you see in a big aquarium that just drifts through the tank next to the sharks, right? And that's really the way you want to be. And when you understand.
And I believe Curtis here because he keeps things on an abstract level. So you can write about controversial issues on a fairly abstract level, and you'll significantly reduce the incentive for people to send you nasty emails. On the other hand, Michael Anton frequently writes on a visceral level, so people respond to him viscerally. Right? If what you put out into the world is empathic, people tend to relate to you with empathy. If you put out a surly, angry attitude towards the world, that's how the world will treat you. If you have a disengaged intellectual perspective, you'll tend to get back disengaged intellectual perspectives, right? We have a profound effect on how other people react to us.
The sharks aren't really sharks, but they have this mentality of superheroes who are defending civilization against these evil, dark powers, and that they really believe that. Then you're just like, why would I threaten these people? I want to act.
So you can't help but think about the world in terms of good and evil. All right. So a few minutes ago, I made the case that there is no objective good and evil unless you can ascribe objective morality to a transcendent source such as God. But at the same time, I also recognize the human lived experience. All right, let's get fully embodied, guys. You can't go through life without regarding certain people as good and other people as evil. Right? Everybody has these visceral responses where effectively there are certain people that you regard as evil and certain people that you regard as good. And having these visceral responses doesn't make you a leftist, doesn't make you a rightist, it doesn't make you any particular ideology. It is inherent in the human condition. We can't help but see the world through a lens of which, one, we believe in free will, because the living life is just unfathomable unless we take that leap of faith into free will. And also, we just can't help but experience the world as people who challenge what we hold sacred and threaten what we hold sacred. We can't help but interpret their actions and their thinking and their whole being as evil. So, on the one hand, I'm making the case there is no objective good and evil unless you ascribe the source of morality to God. At the other time, I recognize lived experience is we can't help but talk about good and evil. So we can talk about good and evil, but we should do it with the humility that it depends upon a leap of faith.
Actually help them. I want to help them see the world as it really is and help them.
He wants to help them see the world as it really is. We all have massive blind spots. Who the heck is he to help them see the world as it really is? They have different moral foundations. It's not that they're seeing the world differently. They experience the world differently because they have different moral foundations, different brain chemistry. The basis of political differences, cultural differences, religious differences is in large part genetic, right? Some people are born genetically predisposed to a very strong disgust reflex. So they see a dead cockroach on the path, or a dead rat, or a dead snake, or some dog poo, and they ugh. All right, so people on the right, people with a stronger disgust reflex, are going to be much more likely to be on the right politically. And people on the right are going to tend to see that which is different and new as threatening. People on the left are going to have a much more calm disgust reflex, and they're much more likely to see that which is new as intriguing.
Them lose all of this fear they have so that they don't have to cry in the shower. And that's a much better pitch in a lot of different ways than the kind of aggro LARPy 20th century pitch that far too many people were into in 2015. And
so Curtis is a nicer person than I am, because I often see them and I think I actually don't think these people are, certain of them are teachable, can't learn anything about the way the world is, and they're making the world worse by what they say. So I just every once in a while, I'm somewhat lazy, or I work in spurts.
So the more aroused you are, the less likely you're going to be to have empathy and to take the time to recognize other people's points of view. So, of course, Michael Anton, who's constantly engaged in verbal combat, he's going to have a much more aroused defense. He simply has less capacity and less interest in trying to understand where other people are coming from. So he's going to make many more sweeping judgments. And it's true for you as an individual. If you're rushing, you're going to be much less thoughtful and caring, as opposed to when you have time, right? If you've got money in the bank, you're likely to be much more thoughtful and caring in the way that you relate to people than if you are unable to pay the rent come tomorrow, right? If you've got 10 important things that you need to do and barely enough time to do them in, you're going to treat people as objects, right? They're just there to facilitate you getting what you want. If you don't have this overwhelming burden of tasks that need to get done right away, then you can have much more of an I-thou relationship with other people. You have more time to be courteous and compassionate. So they did this study with seminary students, and they sent them across campus to give a talk on, looking after the stranger. And on the way to their talk, they lined their talk with people who are in obvious need. And the more late the students were to give their talk, the less compassion they showed to people who are in obvious need. So when we're running late, and if being on time is important to us, we're simply going to have less time for empathy and compassion. If you're constantly engaged in fighting and arguing, you're going to have less time for empathy. I'm a different person doing this show than when I was doing a show with Kevin Michael Grace, or when I was doing a show with people I was arguing with. If I'm arguing, then I'm going to become hyper aroused. My neck muscles are going to tighten. My face muscles are going to tighten. My back is going to tighten. I'm going to have much more of a fight or flight reflex in a discussion. All right. So reasonably often, Kevin would say things that I strongly disagreed with. And I'm not someone who enjoys a lot of confrontation, so I usually didn't want to argue with him, but it did kind of put me into a fight or flight reflex. Now I'm the master of my own ship, and so I'm much more relaxed. I'm doing much less arguing. I have much smaller audience because obviously confrontation and arguing is far more interesting than just listening to one bloke's opinion. On the other hand, I have more time and space to have an embodied conversation, to come on down and to land and to try to understand where other people are coming from.
Or whatever, but I'll go through, a 2 to 3 month dormant period, and then I'll spit out 3 or 4 fairly vituperative things, and people, then the predators want to come after me after I do that, and I have to accept that that's a natural response.
I have experimented with that a little bit because now that I have a Substack, which is kind of a different thing from.
So are people who are happy, are they going to pour out as many vituperative responses? Probably not. Now, I'm not saying that ipso facto, inherently, this means that Michael Anton's not happy. But generally speaking, in life, people who are happy are much less vituperative. And so people who are angry at the world, right, they're often just looking for objects upon which they can displace their unhappiness. So overwhelmingly, I notice people who are vituperative online or on the radio or on TV, they strike me as unhappy people, and they're just looking for an excuse to go off on someone. They feel like if they tear someone else down, that they're going to feel better about themselves.
Having a blog where you really feel this urge to promote, you feel this desire to shill. It's sort of unquenchable. It comes from my Jewish soul, and the and sort of in pursuit of this.
Yeah, so everything can become addictive. All right, so blogging can become addictive, vlogging can become addictive, and then it becomes really easy to just fire off opinions without a factual foundation. And I know I have often been guilty of this. I'm trying to do better as I get older. Morton Kondracki used to write like thoughtful monthly pieces for the New Republic in the 1980s, and then he got hired by Newsweek. And so in his new job, he had to write like a combative column every week. And so he felt, writing for Newsweek, that he was like a special forces soldier, parachuted down and brought into a room that's filled with terrorists and captives, and he's just like going around shooting people, trying to shoot the bad guys and trying not to harm the good guys. But he was under so much pressure as compared to his more thoughtful New Republic pieces. So if I was relying on the streaming for my income to pay my bills, then I would have to considerably amp up the confrontation and the arguments, and it'd be much more blood sporty. But because I can just do this as a hobby, then I don't feel that same compulsion to be vituperative.
With shilling, I went out and I actually attacked a couple of people. I attacked Noah Smith and I attacked Glenn Weil. I was really, I'm not really Noah Smith's enemy. I think I'm actually Glenn Weil's enemy, or he fears or hates me or something. But I was really defending Scott Alexander against Glenn Weil, and I was just beefing with Noah Smith. And the thing is, the difference between me beefing and Michael beefing is that I'm sort of well outside the Overton window of discourse, and Michael is kind of well within it. And so people find
I don't know about
that,
well,
whoa, a based penis measuring contest now.
I'm not saying there are pros and cons to both of these things, and there are very serious pros and cons.
So Michael Anton says that Steve Saylor is the wisest political observer in the world today. So props to Michael Anton for saying that. Now, let's just take a break. Let's have an embodied conversation, and let's all share our favorite verses from the Quran. So I was just sent this verse.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا
Stop. I want to go back. So that was, "O believers, why do you say what you do not do?" All right, so for one member of the Lucosphere, that is the favorite verse from the Quran.
Both of these things, but the point is that the problem is, when I beef with someone, you sort of because there are all of these ways in which it's very easy for me to hit him, in which he can't really hit back. He develops this sort of intense desire to be somewhere else. And that's a sort of fun dynamic, but it reinforces the determination of this person to really, very sincerely ignore you.
Just to defend to some extent.
Whoa! I missed one key verse here. So Let's try it again.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا.
Okay, and so the next verse is how despicable it is in the sight of Allah that you say what you do not do. Okay, so 2 verses are, "O believers, why do you say what you do not do?" So it sounds a lot like the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. "O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this burden of sin? Things that I would do, I do not. The things I would not do, I do." And how despicable it is in the sight of Allah that you say what you do not do. So yeah, we as human beings, we don't get on well. We don't like liars. Liars, as Red Bar in that clip I played from Red Bar this week, liars kind of upset our understanding of reality. They discomfort and challenge our understanding of reality. They're confusing and annoying and disruptive, and just like it messes with our sense of peace. So there you go.
My dissident street cred when the Vegas conference was reported on in Politico or wherever it was. It was a typical point and sputter kind of article. Look who's there. These people are bad. Right. I will give no further explanation. Curtis and I were both mentioned and both quoted as saying whatever we had said at some, years in the past is just, this is all you need to know. These two people are there. They are bad. The conference is bad. So look, we may not exactly be in the same, but hey, come on. If I were quote unquote well within the Overton window.
That was.
And the company that you keep, that does reflect on you. So we may object on the right. Oh, the liberal news media, they're lumping us in with all these other people who attend a conference, but it's not absurd to note the company that you keep. Right? One of the most important things that you can know about someone is the company they keep. Like, if you want to know who I am, look at my 5 closest friends. Like, I'm pretty much a combination of Laponius and Holly and half Galician and Bernard and Glib Medley and Elliot Blatt. So I think I probably spend more time with these guys, and so they're reflective of who I am. So I sure hope they don't do anything embarrassing.
A slip of the tongue. That was a slip of the tongue. I don't know how that came out. I meant to say exactly the opposite of what I said. I meant to say that you were touching the skin. You were in contact. Both. You could almost smell the clean air outside the beast, right? And so my apologies.
So guys, I love all this. Let's get into some more substantive questions though. Here's the first one. Ready to go? Start with you, Michael, and then we'll go to Curtis for response. Is our current regime legitimate? If not, what regime level changes would you implement, sir?
Legitimate. Okay, I'm going to give a geek answer in part so that I can remain just on the side of the Overton window that is required to keep my current institutional affiliations. Aristotle gives an answer on legitimacy that's kind of circular or yin-yang or chicken egg or whatever, right? The two things that make for legitimacy, one is longevity and the other is good government. So a king who's been around, a 10th generation monarch.
Okay, this is not an impressive response, right? When you're dancing like this and then saying, oh, I'm only going to say this to stay in the good graces of the powers that be, and then you go start quoting Aristotle. Come on, man.
Is legitimate simply because the family has been around for a long time. But if he governs poorly, he becomes over time illegitimate, and it's the right of revolution is therefore justified in casting him out. I just happened the other day to be looking at Shakespeare's Richard II, which is kind of what this play is about, right? Is Richard II legitimate? Now, if everybody, I don't know if anybody remembers the play, but the short answer is the dude gets deposed and is replaced by Henry IV.
And of course, it depends on what you mean by legitimate. So if you mean by according to the powers that be, according to the system, then yes, the current regime is legitimate. But on the other hand, there are all sorts of approaches where you can argue the current regime is not legitimate. So it's entirely subjective, depending on your meaning of understanding of the term legitimate.
Shakespeare seems to think that Richard is legitimate in the legal sense, right? He inherited it legitimately. He's from a line and so on. But he governs so poorly that it is just to kick him out.
So O.J. Simpson, the system legitimately held that he was not guilty of murder. Obviously, O.J. Simpson committed murder. The system, the powers that be, the way things work, he was not convicted of murder, but he was obviously guilty of murder. So when the system declares not guilty men who are clearly guilty, it does challenge the moral legitimacy of the system.
Out because he's basically a tyrant, right? So, and then you have to ask yourself the question, and Aristotle sort of explores this, which is, well, where does longevity can't be the full and final answer because every regime had to originate somewhere, it had to be founded, right? It either was, founded like ours, like the American regime was founded, or it's founded by some heroic king or whatever, right? So where does legitimacy originally come from? And it comes from replacing the bad with the good, or at least the worse with the better, for good intentions and building on those good intentions with good institutions, good government, and so on into the future, right? Well, the American regime has been around for a while. It's actually fairly long-lived as far as a republic goes. The oldest written constitution currently.
Replacing the bad with the good, that's the basis of legitimacy. That's just so subjective to be completely meaningless.
Observed anywhere in the world. And as far as I know, the oldest written constitution ever observed in the history of the world. So we're at, 246 plus years. On the longevity question, we'd have to say the American regime is legitimate. On the good government question, I would say the answer is quite a lot shakier. It's not governing well. It hasn't been governing well for a while.
And compared to whom? Compared to which states? All right. If you think that the American regime is quite shaky, like where do you see much more solid and legitimate government?
It also, as I mapped out, I think with some detail, lots of detail in my book, in particular, chapter 3, the stakes, the book is called, it doesn't govern according to the way it says it governs. So the United States was founded according to certain principles and certain rules. There's written law, there's the Constitution, there's the Bill of Rights, all this statute law, and the regime as it actually operates willfully, routinely ignores those things.
And